All right, we are at 12:03, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. Sorry, I was getting an echo on my line. Thanks for muting whoever just muted. So hi, everybody. My name is Jason Hiller. I work at the QTI group, and I am a chair of the Lead United Advisory Council for 2021. I want to thank you all for joining in today's event. We're excited to have you with us. And I'm really looking forward to today's discussion on employee resource groups, or as you'll probably hear them referred to, ERGs, and the importance these groups play in diversity and inclusion in the workplace. So just a few notes before we get started. You'll be muted during the presentation. If you have any questions, please ask them via the chat function. If we do not have a chance to get to all the answers today, we will follow up by email after the event. We do recommend viewing in speaker view. And just as a heads up, we are recording this presentation and we will make it available online later this week. I wanted to take a quick opportunity to share why I choose to volunteer with United Way of Dane County and why Lead United resonates with me. So I grew up in a single parent household, and I was actually a participant in many of the programs that United Way funds in the community. I was a club kid going to the Boys and Girls Club. I was also in a YWCA after school program for most of my elementary career. And so my family always kind of instilled in me the need to give back. So even though we didn't have a lot, we were always volunteering and participating in bowling events. So it really was something I grew up with. And then once I entered the corporate world, I got involved with United Way through our workplace campaign here at QTI. And 14 years later, I'm still involved with United Way and I absolutely love it. I'm super excited with the Lead United group launching last year to be helping kind of guide the future of leadership giving within United Way. And it's so important to me because it's made up of a wide range of community members and leaders who are passionate about making measurable change in our communities. The level of engagement and dedication to the overall mission of United Way shown by the group is truly inspiring and is pushing me to find new ways of giving back. The fact that the group didn't slow down during the 2020 pandemic shows the commitment to making Dane County a place where everyone can not just survive, but thrive. So with that, I will do a quick overview of our agenda. Today, we're going to be hearing from Jennifer Ridley Hanson, who will be joining us to tell us about the Community Builder Awards and how you can nominate a community builder for our centennial celebration year next year. Then we'll hear from Andrea Whitcomb, who will give an overview of the Lead United group. And then we'll move to the Q&A with our panelists using questions submitted by everybody as they were registering for the event. Again, do encourage you to use the chat feature to drop in any additional questions as they come up. And as I mentioned, time permitting, we'll try to get through those live with the panelists. So with that, I will go ahead and introduce Jennifer Ridley Hanson. Jennifer is a director and private wealth advisor with BMO Private Bank, and also a volunteer on the History Quest Committee for United Way's Centennial Celebration. So Jennifer, take it away.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted now, right? Everyone can hear me? Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. Just in case you're not worried, I am not driving. Actually just left an in-person client meeting, and so I'm in my car near the Beltline, so you might hear some noise. But again, I'm excited to be here today, and I want to thank you all for everything that you're all doing to partner with United Way. So I'm here today to encourage you to participate in the celebration of the 100th year anniversary in 2022. So I am part of the History Quest, and this group includes volunteers from a whole bunch of different communities, different committees, partner agencies, and donor groups, and is chaired by former CEO Leslie Ann Howard. Many of us know her. So what we want to do is celebrate the upcoming centennial by acknowledging people who have inspired innovation and impact. So we're asking for your help to identify and nominate community builders. So these are individuals, groups, and partners that have been central in supporting Dane County through the collaboration with United Way at any point during the last 100 years. So we're especially looking to highlight individuals, organizations, and groups who have either demonstrated one of the following. So a commitment to racial equity. So those who have committed to building a more equitable community through work they do with United Way. Innovation is those who, in collaboration with United Way, have discovered newer, better ways to respond to community needs. Collaboration is those who have, in partnership with United Way, actively participated or created collaborative groups meant to address specific community issues. Leadership, which is those who have led United Way through opportunities, critical incidents, pivotal decisions, and transformational change. And then the advancement of United Way's mission. So those who have given their time, talent, and treasure to United Way and inspired others to get involved and give back. So we're seeking nominations, and you can submit more than one, and you can nominate yourself. But September 1st is our deadline. And then throughout 2022, the community builders will be recognized on social media, in digital communications, and partnership with local media and events. So the link for nominations is included in the chat, and we'll send out information in the follow-up email. And please reach out to United Way staff with any questions. And I do want to thank you all for your time today and for helping us to highlight the community builders like you. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Jennifer. And with that, I will turn it over to Andrea Whitcomb, who is another one of our leaders of Lead United.
Well, hi, everyone. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of an overview of the Lead United group if you haven't been involved with it before, or just give you a little refresher. So Lead United was formed in 2020, and it's rooted in the former United Way of Dane County leadership giving groups of Rosenberry Society and Key Club. So together as Lead United, we have created a simplified structure with a more clarified purpose and leveraging the lessons learned that we've had over the years and seeing the power of the peer-to-peer connection and offering some additional compelling events. So one of the goals of Lead United was to remove barriers such as age restrictions and combine the efforts of both groups into one unified and inclusive network of donors. As a part of Lead United, you'll create measurable change by raising essential funds to help us tackle some of Dane County's toughest issues in the areas of education, income, and health, the building blocks of well-being. You'll learn about some of the root causes of our community's most critical issues and the work being done to address them. Like in our event today, we're going to talk about employee resource groups and how we can engage within our communities, within our workplaces. And then you'll have the opportunity to develop leadership skills and connect with business and community leaders through networking and philanthropy. So lastly, you'll get to join events like these that can deepen your understanding of community needs and understand your gift to United Way and how it's helping meet those needs. So welcome to our June event. We are so happy to have you here today. Before we get started with our panel, I just wanted to share a little bit about why I'm a part of Lead United and how it helps me strengthen my impact within the United Way of Dane County. So like Jason said, I am on the Lead United Council. I am the chair of our events committee. I learned about United Way about 10 years ago when I started with one of the workplace campaigns when I was over at Task. And it really helped me see the meaningful partnerships they've created across our community. And although I've moved a couple companies over the years, I'm currently at CUNA Mutual Group, I continue to see the importance of the partnerships and the resources connecting and the people that we work with through United Way. So being involved in Lead United has really helped educate me on critical issues we are facing in the community, but also how United Way is helping address them. And this group really provides opportunities for me to stay connected with other people, organizations, and events that I might not have the chance to otherwise. So really, I have truly cherished the group of people we have on the council and meeting with all of the different Lead United members over the last year. And really looking forward to meeting some of you in person, hopefully within the next several months as we start to get back to more of the in-person events. So one quick thing before we get started with our panel, I just wanted to pause for a minute and ask you to join us on social media. So on our Facebook and Instagram, if you have time, take out your phones and join us in our social media post. So we have one that says, I lead United because, and we would like you to put that post out there if you are comfortable and sharing why you are part of Lead United or why you lead United in the community. This really helps get back to our purpose of Lead United and really, sharing our takeaways with different groups of people and really just helping us connect with one another and seeing other people's why behind why they lead United. So Derek inserted that graphic in the chat that you can share to support United Way of Dane County, but please take a minute either during the event or after the event to share that out on your Facebook or Instagram. And with that, I believe I'll be turning it back over to Jason to get us started on the panel.
Thank you, Andrea. So now I'll go ahead and introduce our speakers and we get going on our discussion about ERGs. Following the event, there will be a toolkit sent by email to all attendees. So you can start taking what we've learned today and start really putting it into practice. So I'd like to let the speakers introduce themselves, their name, role, and the values of ERGs within their company. So let's start out with Joe Hankey.
Excellent. Thanks, Jason, and thanks to the United Way for putting this on and for the invite to talk a little bit about our work at CUNA Mutual Group. Joe Hankey, part of our diversity, equity, inclusion team. I've been at CUNA Mutual Group a little over 5 years, and I will say our formal, and I will emphasize the formal because there's been plenty of informal work around diversity, equity, inclusion that precedes me, but our formal work around diversity, equity, inclusion really kicked off about 6.5 years ago. So I'm one of the early folks in our diversity, equity, inclusion work. And I get to oversee our our engagement resource groups, or ERGs, and our corporate strategy around connecting all of our ERGs. We have 13 ERGs, which is a lot of ERGs, but helping to make sure that they connect into our enterprise-wide diversity, equity, inclusion work, and that they're supported and effective in terms of their work. I think when we think about our ERG community, we really think about kind of 3 value propositions for the organization. It's about bringing cultural insights to the business. So with over 50% of our organization or our employees engaged in at least one ERG, those can serve almost as informal focus groups for the business as they're kind of thinking through challenges or just questions they have around consumers. It's also about helping to attract and retain a diverse talent pipeline through a sense of connection and a sense of belonging, which is really important for our diversity, equity, inclusion work. And then we've seen some work around, or we've done some research where we've actually been able to connect those who are in ERGs as are more engaged, feel better about their connection to CUNA Mutual Group, and ultimately that means a lot to our organization. So we think about those 3 key components in terms of the value proposition for ERGs for our organization.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. And next we will introduce Steph Harold Kyle.
Thank you, Jason. Hi, everyone. Steph Harold Kyle, and I am a part of our community partnerships team with UW Credit Union. And we informally, the community partnerships team was working with our DEI function for probably since we started our journey 7 or 8 years ago, but formally joined the team in January because we saw a lot of intersectionality between the work of our ERGs and our external way we were showing up in the community. And so I serve as our ERG liaison. And also our ERGs, well, our DEI journey started 7 or 8 years ago. It was really led by a steering committee and thinking about how the organization could intentionally and thoughtfully go about DEI in a way that began with leaders to really get that leadership buy-in, and then thinking about how to engage employees from there. And our ERG creation was a big piece of that starting around 2018. So we're newer to ERGs for our organization, and we have 6 currently. I hesitate because our green team just became an additional ERG, and we're really thinking about how sustainability is an overlay within DEI as well. So kind of a part of our DEI structure and a little bit different and separate from our other 5 that are more affinity identity based. And I'll echo a lot of what Joe said and kind of the value that we've seen, certainly with employee engagement and just creating that inclusive space for individuals. Part of our recruitment and retention strategy, definitely. And I think it's been really neat to see how ERGs have been engaged to inform our internal DEI strategy. So Sheila Milton is our VP of DEI. If you know her, she's a fabulous human. Joe and I were talking about that. CUNA Mutual Group is a part of her journey. And she was really thoughtful and intentional about engaging stakeholders from across the organization in developing our DEI strategy, and ERGs were at the forefront of that. So we have a DEI vision that they were a part of, a shared vocabulary internally to talk about different identities, groups, and verbiage related to DEI work, and really leaned on our ERGs to weigh in and do our best to be intentional and accurate in how we were defining the terms we're using. So really, our ERGs have been meaningfully engaged in informing that internal DEI strategy, but also our external representation and how we're showing up in the community, which, like I said, is a part of how I came to be our ERG liaison. But it's been really meaningful to have our employees and from our ERGs really help the organization be thoughtful in how we're showing up in diverse spaces. And we can talk a little bit more about that later in the panel. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Steph. And then next, I'm happy to introduce Teresa Nichols.
Hi, everyone. Great to be with you. Been at Baker Tilly for about 4.5 years now. I am our general counsel at Baker Tilly, and I also chair what we call our DIBS steering committee. And DIBS at Baker Tilly stands for Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging for Success. So just give you a little bit of background on how we structure our DIBS programming. We don't actually use the term ERGs, but it's pretty interchangeable with, so you might hear me use different terminology. So at our firm, we have like I said, the DIBS steering committee, which is made up of 12 individuals firm-wide from all service lines and geographies. Included on that is our CEO, who sits on the DIBS steering committee. 2 years ago, I started chairing the committee, but it has been around, I want to much longer, like 4 years. And our first signature initiative was GROW, which stands for Growth and Retention of Women, and that started in 2007. So at least the one, we call it a signature initiative, can be used interchangeably with ERG, goes back to 2007. So our DIBS steering committee really sets the strategy of our DEI programming firm-wide. And then below the DIBS steering committee, we have what we call 3 signature initiatives that really bring our DIBS strategy to life. And that's GROW that I just mentioned. We have SOAR, which is focused on retention and opportunities for our ethnically diverse team members. And then we have Next Gen, which is a group that's focused on the younger generation. So those who have been practicing for 10 years or less. And then in addition to our signature initiatives, we have team member networks. And we have 5 of those right now. We have Pride, which is focused on our LGBTQ team members. We have Moms for Moms, which is really over the pandemic has morphed into Parents for Parents. Read to Lead, which is a group that's focused on leadership opportunities in readings and sharing that. And then we have a couple of what I'll call move-based or exercise-based, Peloton, running group, and then we have a couple of more that are forming now. So, the importance of our signature initiatives and our team member networks are really, that's how we bring our DIBS strategy to life. And at Baker Tilly, we really do focus on the fact that DIBS is who we are, not just what we do. So we really embed our DIBS priorities and our learnings into all aspects of our business, from our people development to our recruiting to the focus on retention and really how we go to market and serve clients. It's really kind of the fabric of our firm. So I'm going to pause there because I know there's some specific questions, and I think we'll probably go into more details about what I'll just call them ERG for ease of reference. And so if there's questions we have getting into detail about them, I'm happy to share a little bit more about our programming and the focus of each.
Great, thanks so much, Teresa. So I think just to kind of keep a little organized, if maybe we want to continue in the order that you introduced yourselves as we're responding to the questions. So start out with Joe. And the first question is, what do you think has made your ERGs most successful, self-sustaining, and committed to achieving real change and connectedness in your organization?
Yeah, and I know this is a participant question, so great question. I'll start there. I think for us, a couple of things that have been really important, and I'll start with the easy one. I think I shared our kind of value proposition around ERGs, really being able to be succinct and articulate that to the organization has been really important. I will not say it's the most important. I know there are some ERG leaders from CUNA Mutual Group on the call, and it starts with them. A strong leadership team for each ERG is make or break. Whether you're you wear an HR hat or a diversity, equity, and inclusion hat, you don't want to be running an ERG or all of your ERGs. That's not a sustainable model. And so we rely heavily on folks throughout the organization who raise their hand and want to be ERG leaders. And again, without them, you know, our ERGs would not be thriving in the way that they are. You know, I think a couple of things with that strong leadership team that's important to call out it is being able to articulate and think about it as a development opportunity. So again, we've started to you know, just pitch ERG leadership as opportunities for folks to try on new skill sets, to network across the organization, to facilitate a meeting if that's not something you do in your day-to-day job, or you know, manage the finances of an ERG if that's not something you do. So opportunities to kind of take on new skill sets is really important. Ultimately, because this is work that I don't want to call it volunteer work, but it's in addition to their day job. And so it can be a real challenge when managers are asking, you know, what are you doing in that ERG? And what's it doing for you? What's it doing for me and the organization as a whole? So being able to really be clear with the connection to development and be intentional around recognition. If folks read the weekly Better Allies newsletter, there was a piece around compensation for ERG leaders just out in the Friday edition, which I encourage you to check out Better Allies regardless. But recognition, compensation of your leadership team is important, also from a sustainability perspective. And then just one other piece around leadership is the value of executive sponsors. So each of our ERGs have at least 2 executive sponsors. Most all of them, there are a few directors in that executive sponsor space, but most of them are officers, so VP and above. And really, they're there to help mentor that leadership team, provide some visibility opportunities, but also to advocate and raise the attention of you know, that ERGs exist to other leaders in rooms that we're just not in, right? So when you're out, when you're leading marketing for our one of our brands, and you say, you know, have you checked with our LGBTQ ERG around, you know, the messaging, the language, the imagery? It's those types of kind of advocacy moments that is really important from an executive sponsorship perspective. So I think those are a couple key pieces for us, the leadership piece, as well as just being able to articulate the value proposition to the organization.
This won't be surprising. I'm just guessing, Jason, you'd like me to go next because I'm the next in the order. It won't come surprisingly. I echo what Joe says. And what I'd add is I mentioned that our DEI journey really began with a steering committee that wanted to engage our executive team and leadership and then roll it down to the organization and employees. And I think that helps with ERG sustainability because creating that alignment with our DEI initiative and buy-in for the value that things like ERGs bring to the organization help, again, see the value and push that sustainability. Our ERGs have become the go-to groups for certain organizational initiatives to get diverse perspectives and feedback on things. And so, again, I think just the fact that leaders and managers from across the organization see our ERG employees engaged in ERGs as having a really valuable perspective makes the people engaged in our ERGs feel valued and validated and like they are contributing to the organization in addition to creating an inclusive space for individuals. And kind of what Joe was saying, I think it's a great way, while we support leadership development and professional development, participating in an ERG is a way to develop and exhibit skills and expertise that individuals might bring that aren't necessarily leveraged in their job role. So I think that's been a really valuable thing for managers to see, but also for employees. And that's something we're looking to build even more into our ERG process with the community partnerships team providing support, is really just visibility to that recognition and lifting up individuals and the skills they're bringing. And then I think the other thing that I'd add is passion for the ERG really can't be underestimated. So our ERGs are all employee driven. the ERG strategy was really ERGs were initiated and created by 1 to a handful of passionate employees who kind of put together the proposal and worked to structure their ERG. And so I think the fact that it's employee driven for what I know one of the questions that came of a recommendation of groups to begin with, it really was that certainly we encouraged employees who expressed an interest or had an idea to see that they could do it, but really knowing that employees were driving and identifying the need for a group, the desire to participate, and having a few passionate people who really wanted to bring the idea to fruition. Our young professional group was actually our first ERG and had a handful of really passionate folks, some on this call as well, who are the ones that really carried it forward. And we've seen that as our ERGs that are the most successful from the get-go and able to sustain, have even just one person who carries that ERG forward and onboards the next group of leaders. So I think you can't underestimate that as well for sustainability and success. And I don't think, well, I think having diversity of leadership level in an ERG is helpful. So from entry level to higher level positions. I've also would say that it doesn't need to be a positional leader to carry that ERG torch. I think there are a lot of folks in a variety of positions who really just are able to shine when they're given that opportunity to build an ERG and again, create that recognition in the organization.
Awesome, thanks. Teresa, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say I put it into 3 categories, and I think the first Joe alluded to certainly, which is the tone at the top. You know, our CEO is extremely invested in DEI. He was the first chair of our steering committee. He asked me to take on that role a couple of years ago, and as part of that, I said, you know, absolutely, I'm very passionate about diversity issues, but if I'm going to do that, then really we need to hire additional people into the legal team just so that we can, do this right. And he was fully supportive of that. So, the tone at the top really helps. And it's not just the CEO, it's also our full senior leadership team, our board of partners. There's just a lot of buy-in to what we're doing on the DIBS front. So that's been huge. I guess the second thing I would point out is the structure we have. So for each of our ERGs, we have a national committee, and then we have local office committees. And so that's a nice way to ensure, the national committee can set the strategy and the plan for each of the ERGs, but then there's involvement throughout the firm with the local committee. So that's a nice way to get everyone involved. And then I think the third thing I point out is just really having an overall strategic plan. So we have our DIBS 12-point strategic plan that was put in place 2 years ago. That really sets our firm priorities. And I think that that's very important because there's so many different things you can do in the DEI space. And it's tempting to try and do everything at once. But having our priorities tie back to our overall strategy, I think really keeps us focused and allows us, Steph alluded to this a little bit, but, we have buy-in, it's top down, but then also bottom up. It's really critical for the success if there's grassroots efforts from the lowest levels all the way up to, involvement, like I said, of our board and our CEO. So those are really the 3 things I think that have enabled us to find a lot of success with our groups.
Awesome, thanks for sharing all that. The next question, let's maybe start with Steph. How does your business engage with ERGs to make decisions?
So I mentioned that Sheila certainly in our organization engaged our ERGs in informing our DEI vision and strategy. We've also seen other groups from the organization leaning on our ERGs for their perspective, specifically marketing and thinking how we're reaching different member segments. So we have partnerships with La Movida Radio and had voice talent that we're doing some of our bilingual advertisements, for example, and our ERGs kind of weighed in that the accent or the sound just didn't feel authentic. And so we have been engaging employees to be able to provide that information because that's who our members hear when they call on the phone or they stop in a branch. And so certainly small but big things like that. And then also as we continue to revisit our DEI strategy and start to deliver on those initiatives, our ERGs are the groups that we lean on the most, because there is a cross segment of our employee group represented to really help weigh in and inform on those. And I think also there have been some success stories too, or examples where the organization has been thinking of a DEI initiative or a story, and our ERGs have surfaced it and been able to carry it forward. So just recently, for example, our Sexuality and Gender Alliance ERG supported a trans awareness and inclusion policy, as well as including pronouns. And so they helped develop this entire policy and toolkit to support managers and departments in being inclusive and supportive of trans employees who decided to come out or share their journey with their department. And were able to develop not only comprehensive materials, but a way of rolling out and communicating that information and supporting managers and employees in really thoughtfully moving forward with those practices and policies. So different things like those. And I'll just kind of pause there to create time for Teresa and Joe as well.
So am I going next, right? Yep, sorry about that.
Sure.
So I'll just identify a few things. I mean, I echo everything Steph was just saying, but as far as creating, ideas that the audience maybe can consider implementing at their companies. So one thing we're rolling out that I think is a nice way to get the business involved with our groups, but just DIBS overall as well, is we're developing what we're calling a toolkit for leaders that's going to be rolled out this summer. And it was really in response to a lot of our managing partners and partners in general just saying, we'd love to get more involved with DEI initiatives, but there's a little bit of a knowledge gap, or, I don't want to, step on, or foot fault or say the wrong thing or do something that, doesn't make a lot of sense, or just not even knowing what to do. So our toolkit is going to have, as the name implies, a bunch of tools for our leaders to use to get involved. So things like a listen and lead sessions that was going to give recommended topics and recommended discussion guides. We're going to have, a one-pager on responding to difficult events. We saw this last year some really upsetting, racial events that happen, unfortunately, throughout the year. And so we want our leaders to be get more comfortable reaching out to their people to say, how are you doing? How are you, how are you feeling? How can I be there for you? So just kind of a one-pager to give them confidence to do that. We're putting together a guide for how to hold an inclusive meeting. It's just, it's small things that people don't even necessarily realize they could do and aren't doing to make the meeting more inclusive. Steph mentioned, I think, putting together a glossary of key DEI terms. So that's something we're going to be doing. And then also just, giving us a sample. We've asked our managing partners, you should really be incorporating DEI into your office events. And here's, a calendar for the year that you could use as a guide with some recommended events that they could host. So there's a few other things that are going to be involved in the toolkit, but I think that that's a nice way for when people say, hey, I would love to get involved, but I just don't know how, to give up some specifics on how to do that. So we're pretty excited about that.
Great. Joe, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, and I would just add, we're doing a lot of the similar things in terms of what Steph and Teresa called out. I love Teresa, the idea of kind of a toolkit and how folks can engage in ERGs. I think there's this misnomer that if I don't have a particular identity that there's not a space for me. And we've been I think again with that value proposition work, it's just being much more clearer in terms of the opportunity for allies to engage in ERGs, and that's a whole separate sidebar discussion. But I'll just throw that out there. I think one of the things, just to be a little vulnerable here, that we've learned is as our ERGs have gotten more and more popular, from hey, let's reach into our ERG and see what their point of view is on this particular decision or this particular product line, that the requests have gotten overwhelming at times for our ERGs. And so one of the things that we're trying to work on this summer, probably this fall, is how do we centralize that process in terms of what's the opportunity for ERG members to give feedback around a new product line or an HR benefit decision. So again, over the last 15 months, we've leaned on our ERGs a ton, and especially as we went 95% remote in March, and made some adjustments to our benefits and such, right? We were talking to the Women's Leadership Network and to our caregivers ERG and to our young professional ERG to make sure that these changes worked for them as well. And again, that can be overwhelming. That can be a little bit reactive as opposed to proactive. And so one of the things we're hoping to do is to build more of a centralized way for the business, whether that be a marketing function or a communications function or HR, to reach in systematically or in a structured way, so that it doesn't feel like an overwhelming burden on members and on leaders. Because again, I think every ERG is a little bit different in our ecosystem in terms of the balance between wanting to just have a place to connect and have some affinity space. And there's such, again, we've learned this over the last 15 months, such a value to that cannot be overlooked. And there are other folks who want to be able to kind of raise their hand and help us do better from an inclusion perspective. So how do you approach it from a both and perspective, but in a structured way?
Awesome, thank you so much. The next two questions are actually my questions that I wrote in when I registered, and I think that they lend themselves nicely to be spoken to together. So I'm going to kind of to merge the questions. But so you guys, I think, work for primarily larger companies, but is there a specific size of a company that makes sense to have ERGs? And if maybe the company doesn't feel like it's large enough, is any strategies or success stories about partnering with other organizations to maybe have a shared ERG experience for their employees? And I think we'll start with Teresa this time.
Sure. So I don't think that there's a size requirement. I would agree with what Steph and Joe have said, which is, ERGs work best if they're driven by people who are passionate on the cause. And that's regardless of level or title or what the cause is. If you have passion, that's really critical, because then you're going to get the follow through and the ERG will be more sustainable. So, it sort of just depends on the interests of the folks at your organization as to whether, it makes sense to have an ERG or not. I certainly would not do it just to say we've got it. It was really got to be meaningful in order for it to have impact. So as far as the partnerships, we haven't done as much of that as I think we could. And so we're looking for opportunities this next year. It's a goal of ours to find more strategic partnerships, affiliations. One thing I will call out that I think has been really successful is the Madison Diversity Roundtable. I do participate with that, and it's been a wonderful resource. Certainly there's folks from organizations, CUNA, credit union, other organizations throughout Madison that participate, and that has been a really wonderful opportunity to share lessons learned, get ideas, talk about struggles as well. So that's certainly been beneficial.
Joe?
Yeah, I would, I think Teresa's spot on, and probably wearing her legal hat. From a partnership perspective, I think there is, just some co-employment concerns that I would keep in mind. But I think the opportunity to connect, share resources, share learnings, Matter's a great space for that. But also, what's the opportunity to just kind of pick each other's brains and kind of share best practices. And obviously this is an opportunity to do that. I'm more than happy to also be a resource for folks beyond today's call. So if there's any opportunity to do that. And then, as you think about growing an ERG kind of community or ecosystem, I know CUNA Mutual Group is always happy to kind of, let's say, you want to acknowledge Hispanic Heritage Month, and maybe just don't have the infrastructure to put on an event or don't yet have those folks who've raised their hand, to Teresa's point. reach out to folks like CUNA Mutual Group. We'd be more than happy to host and help folks plug in. But it's key. Let's, don't set them up just to have them. Our Allies for Disabilities ERG started about 4 years ago, and it was 2 disconnected conversations. One person coming to me and saying, why aren't we engaging around disability justice in our diversity, equity, and inclusion work? What's the opportunity to build that? I said, I love your passion, and I don't want it to be all on you. 6 months later, I had someone come from a mental health perspective and say, what are we doing from a mental health perspective? And until we had that kind of critical mass, and I know 2 folks are not critical mass, until we had those 2 folks that were willing to lead that ERG, again, you don't want your DEI function or your HR function to be leading an ERG. So want to make sure that there's that passion and that interest. And it started small. It started as 15 people, and it grew to, I think there's maybe 130, 140 folks that are engaged in that particular ERG. So don't be afraid to start small.
Steph?
Jason, I think this is a very good question. And so I was even kind of like, like how many employees do you need? And so I asked some other colleagues that have worked in this space kind of what they thought, because I think it really depends on the organization and the employees that are internal as far as numbers go. But as the folks that I talked to, the consensus was it might be helpful to be an employer of a couple hundred employees to build out an entire ERG infrastructure, just from exactly what Joe was talking about with the critical mass idea. Because if you have 1 to 2 passionate employees and those are the only ones who engage, and then you've got you're a 30-person employer and you have 10 different ERGs that have 1 to 2 folks connecting, I think that maybe that's counterproductive. And so a few suggestions I would think about in that space are, and we're actually even thinking about with our ERGs, and we have about 800 employees, about 40% of our employees are engaged in ERG, but the power of intersectionality and collaborative programming. So not just necessarily recognizing there is certainly importance for there to be space where people share a specific identity, and that space is for those folks. And there is oftentimes a lot of value, especially as it relates to allyship and proximity and challenging bias, and just that we all have multiple facets to our identity, that starting with a group to create and do cross-identity programming, or thinking about engaging in this DEI space first, and then thinking about more of a DEI structure. And the other thing too that I'd suggest that I think our ERGs have done in different ways is thinking about collaborating with outside people, and you asked that piece. And I'll also just give a shout out to, I helped start our Women's Leadership Network ERG, and CUNA Mutual Group's Women's ERG was a great resource that we tapped into to learn from them. So kudos to CUNA Mutual Group. And also, as Joe said, happy to be a person for anyone to reach out to talk this through. But some other examples in addition to reaching out with other ERGs are like our young professional group. One of our leaders is on a junior board of a nonprofit, and they did some programming with that junior board and in support of that junior board. So another YP related group. Our SAGA, our Sexuality and Gender Alliance group, is very engaged with a lot of other LGBTQ plus professional groups in the organization or in the community. And so supporting and engaging members in external programming. So there still is that affinity space. There's programming that supports professional development or other affinity group like activities, and it's could be outside of an ERG space. It might be more like another professional development. And also our Black Excellence ERG partnered with Social X Milwaukee, and now our Raíces Latinx, our Latinx employee group. So another professional group with a focus on folks of color in the Milwaukee area to, again, just create that collaborative affinity space, but building out that critical mass beyond our 4 walls or communities, and kind of leveraging those spaces as it relates to ERG programming. And I might suggest that as a good space for smaller employees to think about building those connections and bridges.
Excellent, thanks so much. And I see we have a question coming in the chat. 40 to 50% employee engagement with ERGs is fantastic. What tactics did you use to engage employees or encourage them to join ERGs? I think we'll be back to Joe to start out.
Sorry, I wasn't ready, but I'm ready now. Yeah, I think it's been a long journey for us. Again, but I don't want to beat a dead horse on the value proposition piece, but we do see some friction when we Teresa, I liked the leadership at the top, kind of the organic piece coming up in terms of those folks who want to get engaged in diversity, equity, and inclusion work. But sometimes candidly, we get stuck in the middle a little bit in terms of middle managers. And I think there was an HBR article recently around they can make or break your diversity, equity, and inclusion work because they've got priorities, and diversity, equity, and inclusion is not always at the top of that list. And so I think helping to get leader buy-in at that middle management piece has been really important. And then, I think there's something special about the leader community that we have in terms of both their willingness to work together and think about, what are events that we can develop, what are spaces that we can develop, to Steph's point around intersectionality. There's such a rich opportunity to have some really nuanced conversations and intersectional discussions across the organization. And again, it gives people multiple entry points into this work. Some folks are going to want to, learn all about a different part of the business, and that's what brings them to the ERG community. Others really just want to have that affinity space, and there's folks everywhere else. And so I think making sure that you're helping to guide your ERGs to be inclusive of kind of those entry points for folks across the organization would be some of my suggestions.
Awesome. Steph or Teresa, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, it seems fairly obvious, but I think you need, good leadership, good communication, and good programming. So on the leadership front, like Joe said, we also, for each of our initiatives, have, kind of a requirement that there's at least 2 people who are going to co-lead, because it's a lot to put on one person. And even one person with passion, that's just, we have found that it's much more likely for a group to be successful if they have at least 2 leaders. So on the leadership front, I think that is really important. But it's, the communication we work very hard on. So we call it Live, which is our intranet. Over the last year, we've had 35 DEI specific stories, which is about 2 a month, and they average leadership like 20% higher than the average article on Live. So we're trying to constantly be promoting the events that we have going on and giving people an opportunity to opt in and join. Each of our groups, as I'm sure most do, have their own dedicated space on our intranet, and we constantly encouraging people to join the groups. So then you get a notification anytime anybody posts, anytime anybody advertises an event or whatnot. But on the good programming piece, forming groups is great, but it's only the beginning stages. You really have to have events and ways to connect that touch on the purpose behind the group and are well done and well thought out in order to get the attendance and keep the passion going and really deliver on what you're trying to do with the group in the first place.
Awesome. And Steph, I might add a secondary question to tie on is, how do you track you'd mentioned, having a 40% employee population. How do you know who are in the ERGs, or how do you track it if you do?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just nodding my head rigorously during when Joe and Teresa were talking, because I think those are really important pieces to getting employees to engage in ERGs. And specifically, I want to quote one thing Joe said was about recognizing that each ERG, depending on the participants and the affinity, may serve a different purpose, and that's okay. I think, and this might represent a little bit of my greenness in this ERG space. So this might be a dud to some folks, but I think it's pretty poignant. So I'll share it and call it out, that I think a lot of ERG experts do talk about kind of the continuum from affinity group to business resource group and serving the business, and how that's kind of a point A to point B evolution. And we just it was an aha that seemed obvious that it's more of a cycle, in that ERGs should and could be okay sitting in that affinity space and serving that purpose. And maybe it's okay that because of where that group is at and the employees participating, that it's not a BRG right now, and directly always supporting the business. And I think that helps engagement as well. The other piece that I think, and I'll get to the tracking piece related to this, but that supports it, and to be vulnerable and candid too, I think represents disparities in which ERGs have higher number of participants, but also higher number of folks who have that identity at the credit union, is that there are some ERGs that have like very passionate folks in them who make and raise awareness. So I do think what Joe said about middle management, creating that in, is certainly true. And there are folks like in our Women's Leadership Network is our largest ERG. And there are a lot of folks across the organization who ensure there's that awareness. And so people are opting into that ERG and as our largest. From a tracking standpoint, we're switching, but we have, I think it's called a talent management system, where we do like our year-end our performance appraisals, our training sign up registration is all hosted. Any mandatory annual trainings that we need to complete are all hosted in this system. And so it's an imperfect system, but when an employee starts, they're given a form and an option to sign up or opt out of an ERG. And it only happens that one time. And so it's imperfect in that we may have employees who want to switch ERGs or missed that sign up, didn't know about it when they started. And so another thing we're going to start doing is getting lists of new employees, and our team will be sending a welcome email and just letting them know and flag that these ERGs exist and inviting them to ask questions. It's also raised in our new employee orientation. So I think that creates visibility. And back to the tracking, one thing that our HR has started doing is reconciling what's in that talent management system with the list that our ERGs are maintaining. So I actually just asked for those numbers, and our Latinx ERG is our newest one, and they had, I think, less than 20 people registered in Halogen, our system. But when I reached out to the leaders, there are between 40 and 50 members in that ERG. So just kind of regularly reconciling what our official systems are for tracking with the actual participant list from ERGs. And we're revisiting how to best make sure that managers have line of sight and visibility, which is why it's in the talent management system, so they can support their employees participating in an ERG, but at the same time that we're making it accessible for employees to opt in, raise their hand, switch, et cetera.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was all really great information. And I feel like I could probably sit here and ask you questions for another 2 hours, but I want to be respectful of everybody's time today. And I will also shout out to CUNA Mutual Group. As we were kind of starting our DEI journey here at QTI, the team at CUNA was super helpful in kind of getting us started and on our own journey. So great job. Thank you to Steph, Teresa, and Joe for all of the valuable information you helped share today. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to remind everybody on the call that your gifts to United Way are really helping amplify voices in our community and in keeping this type of work moving forward and helping, you know, our community members thrive in Dane County. Reminder, we will be sending out a follow-up email to all the attendees with our toolkit that we mentioned earlier in the call. And if we did not get an opportunity to answer your question live during the panel today, we'll do our best to get that in a follow-up email as well to make sure you have all the information you need. And I think all of the speakers have mentioned that they're willing to be a resource if you do have any questions after the fact or need a tip. It sounds like, and you can say no if you don't want them to, but it sounded like you're pretty willing to be resources for us as we move forward. So with that, I will bid you all a wonderful afternoon. And again, thank you for your support of Lead United and United Way of Dane County.
Thank you, Jason.
Thanks much.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.